Thank you for joining us. Please, I invite my panelists to join me on the stage. So let's see, Michael Mellinghoff, Manuel Heilmann, and Anish Mohammed. I hope I spelled your name correctly. Hi, guys, please. Let's sit down. As we had the chance to briefly talk, okay, yes, the mics. As we had the chance to briefly talk before the session, we agreed that there is no need to start with defining what a fintech is. So I'd rather would like to hear from you, which are the areas where you think fintech are most likely to disrupt? And I'd like to hear your opinion based on what has already happened until now, because fintech is here for some time, for some years, and it's not just a concept. So, who's going to start?
Right, I'll be the first one to fall. So, the way I describe it is like, there's been changes that's been happening, and some of this is going to take a bit of time before we really see the impact. So if you think about the so-called cognitive computing, like the AI, machine learning kind of thing, there's a significant amount of investment that banks and other financial institutions are putting in. And we probably won't see the immediate impact of it right now. And similarly, there are other technologies that are coming in that it will take a while for us to see the real impact. So what I would say is, like, there are a few candidates, and the AR, VR, AI kind of thing, they all are very good candidates. The AR, VR kind of thing is behind the curve. The AI, big data, machine learning kind of thing is ahead of the curve. It's actually gone in. We will have to wait for it to actually show the returns, and that's when we will actually see the real disruption.
Thank you.
Well, I think when you look at the fintech landscape today, I think it's still at the very beginning in terms of innovation, but I do think you see progress in the banking space. I think you see more and more companies like TransferWise that are really disrupting the banking space by slashing down the wire transfer fees, by offering cost-effective solutions for people, like in the UK, transferring money back home to India, Pakistan, or other countries where they're from, and the same thing in Eastern Europe. So I think it's helping the people that provide value, and they're disrupting the financial world. Then I think there are some areas where you don't see a lot of disruption yet. When you just think of the insurance business, I think the insurance business is ripe for innovation, and you don't see much happening yet, but I think it's going to happen. When you just think of you're driving a car, I drive a car, I leave my home in the morning, I drive to work 30 minutes, park the car in the garage, and then at night I go home, and I pay the same insurance premium that a pizza delivery guy pays who drives 8 to 10 hours a day. So I think that's, for instance, an area when you look at the abilities of the cars today that connect to the internet. You could easily provide an app or an insurance as a service through your car. The insurance knows as soon as you start the engine that they need to bill you per minute, per hour, per mile, or whatever. They can monitor your behavior, your driving behavior, and influence the premiums that way. So I think that's just an example where I expect something to happen. I don't see it yet, but I believe it's going to happen in the near future.
Thank you. Please.
Yeah, it's Michael Mellinghoff. Pleasure to be here. As Manuel said, it's still very early days. That's very good news. So we believe that the whole area is going to transform. And we have a particular situation in banking because it was guarded in the past by bank secrecy law. And that meant intransparency, and now the transparency comes at full throttle, so there's still a lot to be doing. And in terms of sectors, I absolutely agree again with insurance, but also asset wealth management. Payment is maybe a bit further down the road, but there is definitely more room. We estimate that there are about 10,000 fintech startups worldwide. We have no estimate for in 5 years, but I think there will be even more than that.
if you are looking at the global fintech scene, are there any players that specifically popped out and just you think that are having a very big potential to grow in the following years? I'm curious, which are the companies that you would put on a radar for someone who is covering this globally, not only Europe, let's say?
You're looking at me, so let me start.
You can talk about your companies. That's okay.
As I mentioned before, asset wealth management. There's a company in the US called Betterment. They are, as the startups, the market leader. They collected $6 billion US dollars in the past few years, which is tremendous. Which is not a lot in terms of competition. I think Vanguard collected 40 billion with a similar model in the same time. But for a startup, that is fantastic. Many asset managers would be happy if they had 6 billion to manage. So that's definitely one that one should have a look at, because in the asset wealth management industry, size matters, especially.
Thank you.
Well, I think some people may hate me for that comment, but when you think of the players in the market and who has a potential to become a huge player in the fintech space, I think Facebook is one of them. I mean, just think of almost every active online user has a Facebook account. Every company has a Facebook account. So what does Facebook need? They need a banking license and the ability to hold money and transfer money from A to B. So I think the social...
Do you see that coming?
I think, I mean, it's not a secret that Facebook is working on it. And I think
they have 2 banking licenses.
They already have, so they further down the process than I thought. But I think it's going to happen, and it kind of makes sense that you combine the social networks with banking services, because right now it's still very hard to move money from A to B, especially when it's cross-border. And I think Facebook has the ability to really disrupt the financial world. So I think writing off Facebook, maybe not so fast.
So I'm going to be a bit controversial. So what I do is I actually spend a lot of time analyzing things. And I have some interest in this whole currency transfer ecosystem. So Ripple is one of the companies that I advise, and I have a couple of other companies I advise as well. So I spend a lot of time gazing at what happens. And I consider Amazon as a prime candidate, because it seems to have taken out ecosystems out of ecosystems. When it comes in, it takes it out totally. And I can see they already have the rest of the pieces in the game in place. And I've seen some signals, as I would put it, from various conferences. Essentially, you have signals that come out of industry. So you watch them on LinkedIn, you watch them directly or indirectly for a job post, you watch them for their interest in conferences. These are like 3 easy indicators you can actually look for to see, if somebody's trying to do something. And I see a bit of interest there. And if they actually manage to do that, it'll be quite interesting. They already kind of optimized the supply chain to the nth degree in that sense. So the next optimization would be like, how can you optimize? Just think of it this way. It's a value chain optimization, right? Replace the value with money.
So the big fintechs are going to be Facebook and Amazon?
Well, I mean, Facebook might be as controversial as Amazon, and people may not like to hear it, but I think the truth is that people, that they hate and love Facebook. But when it comes to usability, I think Facebook will have some benefits that no other bank can ever provide, because they have, first of all, they have this cross-border network. They have everybody in the network, so you can basically move money from A to B. So they already have everything in place. What they need is the ability to move money from A to B. As you say, they already have a banking license, or even 2. And I think they will go down that route. They're offering payments now, so you can shop in Facebook and process transactions. I mean, they're going that direction. And I think this is a company to watch. Amazon, I think, is another interesting one. So yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen. But then, of course, you have all these smaller companies like TransferWise in the UK. They're extremely innovative, moving fast, and I think they have a very compelling offering to especially migrant workers who have to send money back home, who don't want to pay 7, 8, 9% to Western Union. So I think it's you know, fintech is such a broad term. I think there's so many segments, and I think so many segments where companies can innovate. And Facebook may take one space, one niche, so does Amazon, but I think there's still enough space for smaller companies to grow and own areas.
Yeah, I think I would like to add to that. I think it will take some time until Facebook or Amazon or others come into the fintech space. Simply, there are other fish to fry, basically, first of all, and they have a problem with regulation. And regulators don't like them, and they don't like the trouble they can make. So that could also harm them. And before they will take a move in that direction, which would probably be an unprofitable growth for them at some point of time, the other fintechs will drive down the prices so far that it might not even be interesting anymore.
I have a very strong counterexample. So I've been watching this technology space very carefully for the past 10 years. So I've been involved in the cloud space when Amazon really started out. So I met Andrew Jassy. My Amazon Web Services account goes back to 2007, almost 10 years. So when it came out, it had nothing. And what they did was they allowed ecosystem to develop. Every time somebody brings up a service, reaches a particular value, they knock it out, offer it below, and they have enough of money in the bank. And remember what PayPal did, right? That's a lesson that we should never forget. What they did to all the competitors. They have a ton of money, get on people, you know, they could tolerate fraud, and then when they reached a point where they could really turn it around, they could do that. I'm pretty sure if Amazon wants to have the same gameplay, they could easily do that. They have enough of, you know, enough of powder in the can. They could easily take on anybody. That's, to me, is a very interesting position to be.
But PayPal still nowadays has very high margins. So that's, we don't have those in other.
So when they started out, if you remember in the 2000, it's like 2000, 2001, they raised a lot of money because there were a whole bunch of competitors out there. The way they outcompeted was just by raising money and actually, you know, spending money on boarding. So if somebody were to compete, you know, imagine a startup versus Amazon or a large player, so Google, even Google, right? So look at it this way. What you are after is people's behavior and data. What banks actually have is actually data. Into the future, if you look into it, what is effectively happening is money as such is just a binary representation of something, right? I mean, right now it's on paper, and it's a cryptocurrency, it's just a binary representation. So it's just who knows the user better. That's the question that comes down to. I don't know who that will be. Amazon has a shot, Facebook has a shot, Google has a shot. Anybody else who doesn't have resources behind them, no access to the data, no algorithms, no data scientists to actually help them, I don't know.
So there is no chance for startups in this area to grow globally and become the Facebook of fintech?
No, I mean, I think to your point, Facebook may still need some time. And I mean, let's not forget, Facebook was not the first social network. Amazon wasn't the first online shopping site. So they usually, you know, watch the space, they learn, they buy a few companies. So I would say probably now it's the right time to start a fintech company because Facebook, Amazon, and others, they will buy them because they still need innovation, they need the people, most importantly the people. So I guess it's probably the perfect time now to start a fintech business. So it shouldn't be discouraging, but I think if you just think of the opportunity for Facebook, I mean, if they already have a lot of data right now. So if they have the banking, if they have, maybe they issue a credit card, so they have a credit card transactions, I mean, it will become a data monster.
We'll have to see. It's not always that big guys who have all the data and all the money in the world succeeded. So
no, that's true. But you kind of see the direction it's going, and Facebook, they don't have to make money with financial services, at least not initially, just like PayPal didn't. But they get the data, and I think that's what they really want. They have enough cash.
Let me ask you another thing. Where do you see fintech growing? By doing in a different way what traditional players, established players are doing right now, creating new services, new markets, as we have a new users, younger users who have different habits versus the older ones who are accustomed to go to the bank, to use a card, and so on. So how do you see things evolving? Amish, please.
I'll give it a go this time. So
Please.
there's 2 or 3 trends I would probably say that's kind of interesting. First is pretty much if you look at fintech, we was almost always focused on a billion population that's been in the mostly Europe and the West. That's kind of changing. If you look at China and India, China has like between 300 plus million users that are middle class, and similar numbers coming out of India. So there's one trend that's emerging. Essentially, there's a very large population that's emerging in other places. So inclusion of, of that 6 billion extra population, that's one thing. And second thing is a change in trust models. So what I mean by that is the way we actually have trust in society and in institutions, that might change significantly. There are new trust models that will allow people to actually disintermediate the people who aggregate stuff and actually hold the trust. And these 2 things, I think, could significantly change the way we actually have new opportunities and how new fintechs will come out.
So I think when you look at the traditional banking space, I just moved from the States to Germany, and when I left Germany, I was dealing with the old banking system. I came back to Germany, and I was hoping to see some innovation. So I went back to my bank that I used before, and the same interface, same way to process a transaction, same products. I mean, there was just no innovation in the last 10 to 15 years. Then I shopped around a little bit. Okay, what else is there? And you find some innovative companies in Germany or in Europe that offer traditional banking services in a user-friendly way, make it very easy and compelling for customers to sign up, to get a bank account, get a credit card, and so on. And so I think it's hard for the existing players to adapt and to adjust. And I think some of them will, but I think some of them will also get acquired by some of the big guys, Amazon, Facebook. I mean, Facebook could easily buy probably the Deutsche Bank in Germany that is on the fence anyway. But I mean, it's. I think traditional banks will have a hard time innovating and keeping up with the fintech space.
How good that you relocated to Germany and not to UK. I just moved to London about a year ago, and I tried to open a bank account as an individual and then later on also for the company. Hell, that is a process. It is absolutely incredible what banks in UK are doing. Now I understand why there are so many challenger banks, so-called challenger banks in London and the rest of the UK. So every process is definitely non-digital. Even one that calls itself a revolutionary bank is by mindset a very old bank. So there is so much development to do and so much space that is really the good news. That the change and the transformation has only started now. And I agree that some German players are further ahead than in terms of the sector than in the UK.
Yes, please.
So I'm sorry, they actually mentioned it previously, but it wasn't really articulated, I think. PSD2, that I think is going to open up a lot. And that's actually going to give like the challenger banks and other people who are fintechs the opportunity to get access to the data that large banks have. Right now, currently we don't have access to. And that I think could be a very different opportunity.
So if the banks, you say, will likely not be able to adjust, do you think we'll also see a complete change of the very complex financial system that we have right now in place? You know very well, the card system, everything, that it's a huge complex system. Do you think it's going to be also wiped out and we'll have something new architecture, a simpler one, blockchain, whatever. What do you think? How do you see the future?
I mean, when you look at the way we pay today, I mean, we still have a credit card that we have to swipe, or sometimes I have a chip now, but we
Americans still are using checks, by the way.
Oh, so you so you know, in the U.S., quite honestly, I moved to Germany, and when I moved to the U.S., I thought, how in hell can you possibly use a check? I moved back to Germany, I had to pay some contractors, and I was missing my U.S. checks, because in a way it makes it so easy to pay somebody. But anyway, but I mean, when you think about how we pay today, it's still so old school, and so the need to have a credit card, and we think, I mean, 10 years ago, credit card was, at least in Germany, was still a big deal. But when you think about how old-fashioned it is to use a credit card when you can just have a contactless payment, so I think there's a lot of room for innovation. But you also already see companies like Apple moving into that space with Apple Pay, still, but leveraging the existing system, not replacing it, but leveraging it to make it better. And that's probably the way we will see it happening in the near term, I guess, because I don't think it's that easy to replace the existing system, but you can leverage it and just make it better.
Can I please add a question to the other ones? It's going to be a seismic change, a brutal change, a sudden change, or something progressive?
For those who change too late, it will be a brutal change, yeah. And it will also be probably then become surprising. What we see is that a lot of banks have now their eyes open. They know what fintech is. They realize they have to do something. This is not going to go away overnight, and will not go away at all. But it will be a gradual change, because there are still parts of the world, the analog world, that is paying for the analog services bankings are rendering at the moment. And it will continually become everything more digital. So I don't see this, but so there will not be a Kodak moment. But I believe it will be, let's say, an extended Kodak moment for some of the banks. So we will see some banks who will not be in the market anymore. In 5 or 10 years, we will see mergers of banks. Whole Europe is overbanked. We're talking about this since the middle of the 80s, in fact, and it's still overbanked. And now we have this crisis, and we will see some mergers. One in Germany, one bank disappeared. Dresdner Bank was merged with Commerzbank, for example. It was a big retail brand, maybe not known here. And we will see further movements here, and we will also see new players. So we believe that there will be, out of the various fintech segments that are developing now, there will be a vertical integration. So development of what I would call startup banks with relatively lean structures. And this will also become new players, and will also develop new brands. But all over, I think banking will become more and more invisible, because you don't need branches when you have contactless payments. Full stop.
That's a good headline, with the banking becoming more and more invisible.
I mean, the way I would describe it is, if you look at the curve distribution of how much return they get for doing anything, they'll be pushed up the curve. So it's just like evolution, right? So the dinosaurs were around the globe like 200 years ago, and when mammals evolved and when the pressure came down, mammals just, you know, broke through the evolutionary curve. Literally, that is more or less going to happen for the banks. The banks have been, as he was describing, you know, so slow to adopt to change. And if either the regulatory pressure or other pressures, it actually flip it, as in, you know, make them compete for cost of transaction to go so low that they can't transact, you know, and still remain afloat. All the people, all the fintechs who actually have the ability to do that, the mammals of this world, will actually survive. I mean, there might be a few dinosaurs left. It's like the reptilians, like the crocodiles, right? Those might just evolve, and you know, cockroaches, right? I mean, those are evolutionary examples of things that survive. But otherwise, the rest of them will be just wiped out.
Okay, we only have 2 minutes left, so briefly, main challenges for the fintechs, and if you could also answer very quickly, is Europe a good place for starting fintech? Do we have all the ingredients, or we just look at the US and that's it? Less than 2 minutes, so please.
I would say Europe is a great place. There's a huge barrier between the US and here. We will have an additional barrier, most likely with Brexit coming up into the Anglo-Saxon part of Europe. So I would say yes, absolutely. It's definitely a good time to set up a great solution. And we have great ideas. You will also find monies. Great minds always find money, also potentially easy. So no, I'm very optimistic for this sector still.
Thank you. Please.
For me, the way I think is I'm a bit skeptical. So the reason I say I'm a bit skeptical is like scaling is a non-trivial challenge. So when things work, when things start working, you need to actually scale from what you are to real large scale. And there are only very few people globally available who could do the scaling bit. And if we can't attract that talent, so right now, if you want to do scaling, these guys cost like a couple of mil per year kind of thing. And there are like a few in Google, few in Facebook, few in Amazon. And those are the kind of people we would need in Europe to actually get our ecosystem to the scale we want. And there are some other small technological challenges, I would put it that way. If we can't solve it, we will have a huge challenge. But market size-wise, we have a bigger market, but there's a language problem, and there's still problems with moving people across. So I'm a bit skeptical.
Yeah, I would agree with you that the US, of course, I mean, it's one huge market, one language, and in terms of regulation, certainly a little easier than Europe. And of course, you have the money in Silicon Valley. So I think that Europe has to deal with some challenges. The other one is the talents. I mean, they go to Silicon Valley. I mean, the big guys, they go there because this is where the money is. So I think there are some challenges, but I do think it's possible to overcome these challenges for some companies, but I also believe that there will be US players entering the European market. I think that's something that we will see down the road, and I think we mentioned two of them that I think we will see in the future, also in Europe. And I mean, when you look at some companies in the payment space, where I'm from, I mean, you see them coming to Europe. Stripe, Braintree, they didn't exist 5 years ago. And why could they enter the European market? Because there was little innovation. And I think we'll see this with other areas in the fintech space.
Gentlemen, I'm afraid our time is up, so thank you very much. Let's applaud the speakers. Thank you very much.